Healthcare consumers, providers, creators, and advocates. Health and wellness should be everyone's top priority, and it's a dynamic topic, complex and sensitive to a vast array of factors from a local to an international scale. The healthcare industry is now at the forefront of everyday life and hopefully on the cusp of a renaissance. We're glad you've joined us for this series that explores the ideas shaping healthcare. I'm Minta Ferguson, healthcare architect and director of the Strategic Facility Planning Group, McMillan Pasden Smith Advisors, and this is Ideas Shaping Healthcare. Our guest today is Ali Hobbs. She received her master's degree from Clemson University in Industrial Engineering. She is a project manager on CBRE's Facility Activation Solutions team, which we will dive deeper into. Ali has a strong passion for improving healthcare by analyzing operations and helping to bridge the gap between construction, technology, and clinical operations. She volunteers for the Society for Health Systems by serving as a Healthcare Systems Improvement Conference Chair and for Big Brothers and Big Sister of the Greater Charlotte as a Big Sister. We're always interested in new tech and technology and tools that are on the forefront of healthcare and forging the way. Today, we want to talk about one tool that we have found successful in facility activation and transition planning, which only came out of our experience through COVID. So thanks, Ali, for joining us today. I want to talk a little bit about how healthcare has worked during COVID and what exactly we're going to talk about with you today, which is a little bit about a tool that came out in facility and activation planning, and it's something that came up during COVID, and it's going to be continued to be used. It's a bit innovative, but to give some background, nurses and doctors, they've been declared the healthcare heroes during COVID. And it's not just the nurses and doctors. It is all the people who make, hospitals function. It's environmental services staff, it's dietary, biomedical, the engineering team, administrative, there's security, right? The list goes on. And they're all instrumental during COVID and making it all happen. And we've all had resilience and growth and innovation during that time. And it's changed the way we do our jobs, some maybe for the better and some not. But today I think we want to talk about maybe a positive example of innovation, something that came at a really trying time that we think is here to stay. And it's been impactful to the way we do our jobs and your job, but also maybe healthcare workers as well. And so, it's really relative, like I said, to activation and transition planning, but I'm not sure everyone knows exactly what that is. It's a very specific activity, and I think it belongs to all kinds of facilities. Just healthcare tends to be more challenging. When you think of the lean healthcare flows, there's at least 7, and they can be more, and there's subcategories. Would you mind explaining really what is this service?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm very excited about this, very passionate about it. So I love informing more people about, I'm not just helping hospitals open, that this is a true service that I think every hospital opening should have one of these roles and ultimately necessary for their staff to feel comfortable. So I did do a little stat lookup. I wouldn't be an engineer if I didn't. But there are, as of this morning, 227 hospitals that are somewhere in a construction phase. So that is groundbreaking to construction complete all over the U.S. And these hospitals are, these construction projects are greater than $100 million. Mm-hmm. So these are new replacement hospitals, new patient towers, large entities that require, as you said before, coordination between EVS and facilities and marketing and volunteers and registration and everyone who comes together in addition to those nurses and the frontline healthcare staff. So something that a facility and activation project manager such as myself would do is come in and bridge this gap between construction and technology and the clinical aspect of it to glue everything together and make sure that on day one of operations, everybody feels safe opening this hospital and knowing that there will be no lapse in patient safety, that they are going to, oftentimes when we do these moves, you are awake at 6 a.m. with the emergency department at one facility open, and you go to sleep with the emergency department and full hospital open at a new facility. So there is no time to second guess anything. Like, we are live. So we're there to help bridge all those gaps and make sure everybody feels just extremely comfortable. And that includes the education and training piece as well.
Right. So, you talked on a couple of things I want to hit here. One, they have the experience in one facility. So that's what they know. It's ingrained in them. They have those habits. And they're going to a new facility. So that is perhaps new habits that they have to pick up and know. And we know that takes time. And so that really is where the training piece comes into play. And it's probably changed a bit during COVID, right? We closed down. So perhaps, what was training like before COVID for these staff during this process?
Yeah. So, and taking one step back into that, understanding their new habits and their new space, we're also having to show them the design intent of all of these floor layouts. Because often the people who were there doing that design 2 years ago before it's about to be built aren't there now. So we're going through all of those processes. And so that education is there to say, hey, this is how your space is built. This is how it was anticipated for you to do operations. Let's look at how you what your habits are in your previous space and how we can adapt them for the new. So the education that we did pre-COVID was having all of these one-on-one departmental meetings where I have the floor plans out and we're physically like taking a little like sorry game cube thing and moving them through the flow so they can see, hey, this nursing station looks pretty tight. This waiting room looks tight. How many chairs are there? What are we going to do? So obviously in COVID, we don't want the 30 people in the room that we might had previously had. And they won't, no one feels comfortable huddling around a table looking down on it. So that was a little bit of the training before, and also having them walk the site for long, extensive periods of time to get used to it. Especially in COVID, we know we're experiencing a lot of staffing problems. So not only do they not have the time to come and meet with us and spend it learning the new facility, but also they don't want to from a COVID perspective.
Yeah.
They're already...
they're hesitant.
Hesitant.
To do that.
Yeah, that's the right word.
Yeah. So, okay. So before everyone was together in a room. COVID happens, the nation essentially closes down, with the exception of hospitals and even construction projects. Construction workers were essential workers, and so some projects continued, which obviously you're involved during that phase of the project. So what happened? Because even though construction was happening, you couldn't necessarily meet with everyone to do training. So what happened at that point for your projects?
So, yeah, like the hospital's still going to open on the day that it was scheduled to open. So we never took a pause per se. We had to almost flip that switch immediately of, all right, well, now we're doing virtual walkthroughs via Zoom or Teams, and having the floor plans up on the screen and taking our cursors through. It's not as fun as the sorry pieces, but they can at least see what we're talking about. I have, since having to do those virtual meetings, gone to an in-person tabletop, and you do get a lot more out of it when you're in person versus what we were doing initially with just a PowerPoint pulled up, a floor plan pulled up, trying to like piece together their questions. So that's really what led us to look for something else, because we knew that there was still a gap in this education piece of it's not as good as the in-person. We can't just stay on Zoom all day. How do we still get this message across?
Okay. I got it. So I think it's interesting. So there's a quote that I wanna read, and it goes, "Innovation no longer remains a choice, but has become an imperative," and it's by Narendra Modi. And I think it's particularly true right now, and I think it's very applicable to healthcare anyway, because I feel like there's a lot of change and innovation going on with AI and technology, especially. But you were kind of forced to be innovative. You had no choice. And so tell us about what is the tool that you started using? How did it change, your process of how you work? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, there was this gap that we knew existed. This healthcare staff might not have realized that it existed, but we knew that they weren't getting what they needed to from our meetings. So I think, like everybody else, we went straight to Google and doing some networking to see what's out there from a technology standpoint. And healthcare is an interesting space with technology because there's so much technology out there, but are healthcare workers willing to adopt it? So we basically bridge this gap between this technology insight works and the healthcare staff saying, this is how we would like to use it. This is how we think it should be used. And a little bit about Insight Works is it is interactive, not so much a 3D virtual experience.
Okay.
But it is a more interactive. They can see different views of the hospital that they're not getting from a traditional architecture floor plan.
Okay.
But we're also not spending the money to put them in a virtual reality headset to be in the hospital.
So it's kind of just maybe a floor plan. You can see some walls extruded a little bit. So it's kind of a 3D model on the computer.
Right. And then from that, we can add different things in it. So that's how it becomes like an education and training tool. So we coordinate with all of the vendors to say, hey, do you have training videos that you're planning to send to staff? In our meetings, we did a lot of paths of travel through the hospital and different floor plans. So we can incorporate all of that onto these maps. So if there's a bariatric stretcher being used on a pre-op space, you can click on a little bed icon and it'll directly open up to the Stryker video of how this bed would be used. So it's a training method, but also where all of the training documents are housed. So it's almost an organizational tool. It streamlines, hey, staff, all you have to do is go to this one spot and see everything you might need for the new hospital.
Okay. So I think that's helpful for people because they can see it, but they don't necessarily have to be there. But it seems like there's a lot of information loaded into this model or this tool that you're using. Did it change how you spend your time in getting prepared for the training?
Definitely. So it shifted almost. And I think anyone who's had to plan for large virtual facility sessions would know that it's almost 10 times the work to prepare up front than to actually run the meeting. So that has shifted where we're having to reach out to all the vendors and get all of their videos and information. What is nice is COVID has created this culture of everyone's having to adapt and everyone's having to get used to this virtual environment. So luckily for us, I think pre-COVID, it would have been pulling teeth to get some of these vendors to coordinate with us. Because in the past, all we would do is these not all we would do. They were very large events, but they would be vendor fairs where all of the vendors would come and show, okay, here's the RJO lift. Here's how you use the lift. Here's how you use the bed. They would all be in one physical space all at the same time, and we would run staff through that. So now they also know they can't really do those fairs as much anymore because of the social distance constraints. So they're ready and willing to participate in whatever we're bringing to the table as well.
Okay. So, you talk about, everyone is together at these fairs to kind of go through the equipment and the rooms and how it all works. And that's a live event. So people have to experience that, process it, and basically memorize it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that by this tool, maybe do they have access to it on multiple occasions? Is it, you learn by doing and repeating. So do they have the opportunity to go back and relearn something if they feel like they didn't get it covered maybe the first time?
Definitely. So everyone has access to the full gamut of Inside Works. So even with the, if you think about it, the equipment, training, tools that way, but also if you move to a different department, we see a lot of that happening right now because of the staff shortages.
Shortages.
Ooh, shortages. I think there is. So they're having to move departments. So the equipment has now changed. Their passive travel has changed. How they're going to get blood products has changed. Different things like that. So they don't have to go through the entire training again. They can just log back into InsightWorks and click on a different floor.
Okay. Time is sensitive, and I think especially for healthcare workers, right? I mean, there's the Great Resignation, there's a lot of burnout, and they're all having to deal with an increased number of patients from COVID. So time is sensitive. So does this tool help them in time, or is it hurting them? Is it less time or more time?
So the short answer is less time.
Okay.
And one of the things that healthcare workers didn't get the benefit of during this COVID, it's still happening, during this period is they don't get the benefit from working from home. So they are missing out on that work-life balance. So not only is this less time because they're not having to drive over to the hospital, interrupt their day, they can do this from the comfort of their home, giving them more flexibility in time as well. And it's not as standardized too. So why it would be a shortened time is if they feel very comfortable with the lifts, they can just skip right through it on that education and go to the next one rather than being in a training session where everyone's learning the same thing step by step, even if they've been using that piece of equipment for 10 years.
Have you been able to quantify what the savings is from using this tool?
Definitely. So when we approach our clients and we're like, hey, we want to implement this tool, here's how much money it is, the CFO is always like, well, is this actually going to save us money and time? So we actually have to develop on our end like an ROI of what they're going to get out of this using InsightWorks. So we have found that based off, reducing the time that it takes for staff, also the time that it takes from the education team to pull all of this together. You think that's hours and hours of work that they're typically creating this. We're taking that out, and we're also giving some time back to those ancillary pieces who don't necessarily have to think about this at all. I mean, it's standard across all platforms. So once it's developed once, you kind of never have to think through it again, or if you do, it's minor changes. So often with InsightWorks, it's a 5-year contract. So it's not just the time of opening, it's education from now for the next 5 years. So we expand that money savings of things that you don't have to spend time developing, let alone the reduced time in actual doing the training. So we've seen that it more than pays for itself year after year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a huge benefit.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of an upfront cost, but once it's implemented, just like everything else, the costs are dramatically cut in half. So
well, I think a lot of people are skeptical when you introduce something new and, you have to develop it in terms of, what is it going to take from them? And, is it proven? Does it work? And all those kinds of things. So I think you've been able to do the due diligence around it to show that it's worth it.
Oh, the first time we brought it up, the education team was like, no. That sounds like something we're going to be doing, loads of PowerPoints because that's what they're used to, right? And we were like, no.
No one wants death by PowerPoint.
Do it and help you get there faster. And they're like, it's only going to take 3 months. That's the development and the design of it, from everything that needs to be input and then everything that needs to be built from like a graphical floor plan perspective. So 3 months and you're good to go for 5, 10, however long you want to keep this up.
are you able to use this tool for other things? Is it just the training for transition and activation planning? How are hospitals able to use this in other ways?
Yeah, so I think hospital leadership was very excited about this tool, but other than them, the education staff at the hospital was most excited that this is going to revolutionize the way that they do orientation and training now. Because first off, the shortages, they're pulling nurses from all over the country. So if they can get them in the door, let's get them in the door. And now they can do this upfront orientation, understanding what they know and don't know and what type of equipment they have prior to ever stepping on the campus. So it gives them a leg up. So once they get there, they only have to do like that true, following, shadowing orientation rather than here's a full building tour. Here's where our bathrooms and our lockers are. Here's where, EVS is and things like that. So we're able to cut down on orientation and training. And also, some things from like an ancillary support have gotten a lot better because...
Oh, that's always great.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, nurses come in and they learn their floor and they focus. They're very diligent on their task at hand, which I think everybody is. But being able to see this bird's eye view of how far it is for imaging to come and get the patient to then take them back down, they see, wow, that's really far for them. If I have the option,
empathy.
like, yes, it's creating some perspective that they now take it upon themselves. Like, I actually have, 2 minutes. I'll just go do that. I'm sure they're swamped. So we've heard a lot of positive feedback from the support services areas as well.
Oh, I love that. That makes me really happy.
Yeah.
So before we talked about training is in person. It's a lot of one-time big events and fairs, tours through the hospital. And then in COVID, we used this tool. The innovation happened of this virtual technology, the building model, being able to collaborate with vendors and bring in multiple sources of information for training. And it seems really successful. Is this something that you think is here to stay? Is it perhaps maybe part of services from now on? Do clients have an option to use it? What do you think the future of this is?
Yeah, so we are going with the base model that this is going to be part of our services forever. Just we see the huge benefit of having this 3D model and having all of our education and training in one space rather than it being housed in a junky kind of university training model that they have like hospital based. That's sometimes what we see, and they can't always include all of their education in one spot. So it's, piecemealed together as best they can, but having this in one central location is a huge benefit. And also being able to see the hospital in this 3D environment rather than just the architecture drawings. That's always something that we come in and struggle with because healthcare workers don't know how to read architecture drawings, but those are the drawings we have. And so we before used to like color code and PowerPoint, like, hey, this is this area and that's this. And now that takes all of that off of our plate and puts it in a much nicer, more professional looking environment.
So, Ali, if people have questions about this tool and what we're talking about today, where can they get more information?
Yeah, I'd love to include a link, a little bit about facility and activation solutions. I know we touched on it a little bit, but I think it's very important. And we'll also have the link to InsightWorks, so you can see what a floor plan would look like, what including the icons would look like, and get a better sense of what we're talking about here.
All right. Well, thank you, Ali, so much for joining me. You've given me a lot of insight into the way this is going now and where it's going to go in the future. But I really value your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think it's really exciting to talk about this stuff, and I love just helping the hospitals get ready for day one operations any way we can.
This is the Pulse Check, where I review the key takeaways from this podcast. The first one, I think, is money savings. Who doesn't love to save money? And healthcare is really expensive, and we're always looking for savings. The second, I think, is a benefit to staff, work-life balance. There's less time involved. They can do this remotely from home and be with their families. And then finally, I think being able to use this tool beyond just a one-time event, it makes it more effective for retention of information. It consolidates training of multiple things into one platform. So I think it's an easy-to-use tool. Thank you for listening to Ideas Shaping Healthcare. If you have any questions on today's podcast, you can find our contact information via the link in the description. I said today's instead of, yeah.
Just pick up the last part.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Ideas Shaping Healthcare. If you have any, all right. Thank you for listening to Ideas Shaping Healthcare. If you have any questions on this podcast, you can find our contact information in the link in the description.
Try that one more time.
Okay. Thank you for listening to Ideas Shaping Healthcare. If you have any, I'm done. Okay. Oh, we can get this. Thank you for listening to Ideas Shaping Healthcare. If you have any questions on this podcast, you can find our contact information in the link in the description. Thank you for tuning in to Ideas Shaping Healthcare, an Idea Exchange production brought to you by McMillan Pasden Smith Architecture and Advisors.